The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome. My name's Charles Christian and you're listening to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show. Thank you for joining me, and in a moment we're going to be looking at a little bit of Whitsuntide folklore. So let's get on with the show. And now here's Janie. Now, how are you doing? Because I gather you've just given up drinking caffeinated tea and coffee and things like that. On a scale of 1 to 10, are you?
You're feeling brave, aren't you? I suppose because you're on air, you think I can't go into strange mad woman living on the edge. Oh, it's terrible. I'd say it's worse than giving up smoking, which I had a brief flirtation with many years ago when I was more stupid. And I guess it's very difficult. But I feel better today. Day 3, I'm starting to see some improvement in my temper and irritability. And madness.
And madness. Madness takes control.
Yes, it's something that I now want to stay off forever because I never want to go through the withdrawal symptoms yet.
Right. Anyway, and talking of today, the day we're actually recording this is what used to be would have been the old Whitsun bank holiday. Now, a bit of background here. It's like a lot of festivals in Britain and Ireland. It originally began as a Christian festival, and it's the Christian festival of Pentecost, which took part on the 7th Sunday after Easter. So technically, Whitsun this year, 2019, is not until the 9th of June. However, way back in the 1970s, when Whit Monday, that's today, was a bank holiday, it was changed and it became a fixed event on the last Monday in May. So the Whit bank holiday is today, but the Whitsuntide Christian festival is not for another week. And for those of you listening in America, it is also Memorial Day. You have a Memorial Day holiday over here. Anyway, Janie, you found one of the more little obscure traditions associated with the old Whitsun festival.
Yes, indeed. And it's one for us ladies,
Yeah.
she says, heavily laced in
Sarcasm.
Anyway, Mother Shipton's holiday. Okay, so on Wednesday in Whitsun week, the Cambridge washerwomen used to go to Laundress Green to celebrate Mother Shipton's holiday, which was named, obviously, after the famous Yorkshire seeress. So they got there, they drank tea laced with rum, which is good, obviously, and talked about washing, I imagine. Apparently, the symbolic work of the washerwomen who, in cleansing fabric, perpetrate the web of weird, that's capital W and capital W, against dissolution, links them to the middle one of the 3 weird sisters of whom Mother Shipton was a personification. So, and apparently, it reminds us that in former times, actions now considered tiresome chores, like washing clothes or cleaning, were also endowed with a symbolic, spiritual function. So, next time you're doing drudgery, which effectively it is, while your husband swans off to the pub, try to spiritually savour the symbolism of it.
Or have a cup of tea laced with rum.
Yes.
And for those of you unfamiliar, Mother Shipton is probably a historical person who lived sometime in the first half of the 16th century. She was known as Ursula Southhill, and she made lots of prophecies. Unfortunately, none of these were written down until about 80 to 100 years after her death. But she was very well known at the time, and during the Great Fire of London, Samuel Pepys, the diarist, was in the company of the royal family, and they were heard to discuss the fact that Mother Shipton prophesied the event. Her most famous collection was published in 1862 and contains the prophecy that the world to an end shall come in 1881, which it didn't, but there was a revised version came out in 1920s which said the world shall come to an end in 1991, which it also didn't. And she supposedly also foresaw automobiles. A carriage without a horse shall go. Disaster filled the world with woe.
She was right there then.
She was right there.
Yeah.
And of course, that's going to get worse with driverless cars.
Yes.
Yes. And she's also, during her life, supposedly made a true prophecy about Cardinal Wolsey, who was Henry VIII's crony, yes. And he was falling out of favour with the king because he didn't arrange the divorce with Catherine of Aragon.
Yeah.
And he decided to buy a property in York, so it was a bit out of the way. And Mother Shipton said, the mitred peacock, that was him, shall want to live at York and shall see it, but shall never come thither. A lot of thithers there. And it actually came to pass because Cardinal Wolsey was on his way to York and could see the cathedral in the distance when a messenger called him, recalling him back to London to face charges. But he died on the way down there, on his way back.
He just sort of up and died on the way back.
Well, it was probably the thought that he knew he was going to be beheaded.
Yeah,
so that probably be a thing. But, there we go. So, Mother Shipton and her Mother Shipton's Day.
Yeah. So she's quite famous for really not being awfully good at prophesying, isn't she?
Well,
Apart from the car thing.
And that was made up 300 years later.
Didn't like to pick you up on that.
Yeah, exactly. I expect there's another one at this very moment saying the world to an end shall come in 2021 or something like that.
I hope not, because it's only a couple of years from now.
Yeah. Well,
Rather hoping to get a few jobs done.
Cancel the window cleaner for that week.
Yes.
Thank you, Janie.
Something wicked this way comes. Weird Harvest Press presents Harvest Hymns, the sweet fruits and twisted roots of folk horror, a 2-volume set of books investigating the music of folk horror, featuring contributions from some of the biggest names in the field: Candia McCormack, Johnny Trunk, Maddie Pryor, Sharon Krause, Jim Jupp and Kemper Norton, to name just a few. Available now via lulu.com. 100% of all Weird Harvest Press profits are donated to wildlife charities.
Welcome, fool. You have come of your own free will to the appointed place. It is time to keep your appointment with the Wicker Man.
So I spotted a comment the other day which said that you can even buy parts of the crown of thorns on eBay. And I thought, what? The crown of thorns? You know, the thing that Jesus was meant to wear when he went on his way to crucifixion. On eBay. So I checked it out, and no, you can't. But you can buy not parts of the crown of thorns, but a crown of thorns. They're described as genuine in the sense they're made of real thorns, and they probably come from Palestine and Israel, the area around Jerusalem, so if you like, the Holy Land. So they're real that way. Anyway, it got me thinking, what else can you find? So I had a little search around, and before we go any further, I think we need to look at how the Roman Catholic Church assesses relics. There's actually 3 categories: first class, second class, and third class. First class relics are items directly associated with the events of Christ's life. So that means parts of the manger, parts of the Holy Cross, crown of thorns, the stone staircase in Pontius Pilate's palace that he was made to walk up. The Vatican now has this and has recently reopened it for pilgrims. It needed restoring because so many people have kneeled on it over the centuries. It's worn away. And then the other category of first-class relics are the physical remains of saints. So hair, bones, skulls, limbs, the likes. The more famous the saint, the more valuable the relic, and martyrs' relics are more highly prized than relics of just saints who die in their beds. And the parts of the saint that were significant are also more highly prized. So King Stephen of Hungary, his right forearm is important because of his status as a ruler, ruled with his strong right arm. The head of St. Thomas Aquinas, he was a famous medieval theologian. His head is the most important part because that's obviously where the brain was, where he did all the thinking. And indeed, shortly after he died, the monks at the Cistercian Abbey, where he died, removed the head. And if you've got a saint who did a lot of travelling, and the bones of his feet might be more prized. Next up, second-class relics, something owned or used by a saint. So a silver crucifix, a rosary, a book, and again, items more important in the saint's life become more important as a relic. So if it's just, say, Mother Teresa's tennis shoes, that's not as important as, say, Mother Teresa's rosary. And finally, we've got third-class relics, and these are objects that have touched a first or second-class relic. Yeah, getting a bit confusing here. So pieces of fabric that allegedly have been kissed or used to wipe the brow of a saint, that's a third-class relic. There's even something called nails that have touched nails from the Holy Cross. I'm not quite sure how a nail touches a nail from the Holy Cross, but that's a touch nail, and that becomes a third-class relic. And indeed, one was on sale in New York a few years ago and sold for $1,800. Now, obviously, there is a huge ground for fraud with these, and indeed even in the Middle Ages there was a big issue with fraudulent relics. It was quite an industry because, I mean, let's face it, one piece of wood is very much like any other piece of wood. Calvin, the 16th century Protestant theologian, he once commented that there were enough pieces of the true cross going around the world that you could build Noah's Ark from it. So that is obviously an issue. There's also a thing called the, not quite sin, of simony. That's trading in relics, and the Catholic Church is very hot on this. So where do these things go on sale? Well, some do appear on eBay. Most of the ones I found on eBay UK have been third-class relics. pieces of fabric that supposedly have been touched or somehow connected with saints. But sometimes first-class relics crop up there. This is despite the fact that eBay has its policy that prohibits the sale of human body parts, so bits of bones from a saint really shouldn't be there. But there you go. Where money's involved, people can be a little bit insensitive. There's also specialist websites you can find now. I found a very intriguing one called RussianStore.com, which has a huge range of relics available. Some of them are clearly very pricey. Documented reliquary with important relic from the wood of the true cross of Jesus Christ. Now, it's worth noting that some of these splinters of the cross are so small you need a magnifying glass to see them. They've also got bone. They've got bone from the true head of St. John the Baptist. The true head relevancy being that there are several churches around the world that claim they've got the head of John the Baptist lurking there. Head of St. Thomas also is fairly well spread around the world. They've also got a relic from the veil of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Yeah, and a relic from the chemise. That's sort of really the vest or nightie of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And relics from the three wise men, the three kings. Getting down to prices. For $3,500, you can get a reliquary containing a relic of St. Mary Magdalena. Doesn't say what. There's another one here, or St. the Martyr and St. Agatha. Not sure who she is, but it's a bit of bone from her. $3,500. Relics of St. Anthony of Padua, $6,000. Reliquary here containing some of the blood of Jesus Christ, $5,500. So we say it's plenty of stuff out there. So I just thought I'd mention it. If you are interested in relics, you can buy them online. However, here's a little intriguing thought. There used to be, the report I've got several years old now, but it's about a dealer in New York that's been selling religious relics for decades, and she describes her typical customer as male, single, middle class and gay. Nope, that's her words. So there you go. And the prices soar from astronomical to relatively a low price. You can get a reliquary containing bits, I can only say it's bits, I think they're tiny little bones, of the patron saints of Milan, St. Ambrosius, St. Marcellina, and the martyrs St. Gervasus and St. Protestius. So 4 for the price of 1, and that's for a mere $475, which is probably not really relevant if you don't live in Milan. I say the issue is that if you are making money out of it, it's not permissible. It's a sacrilegious practice, buying and selling what is spiritual, namely relics, for what is temporal, money. So selling relics on eBay may be simony, but it may be permissible if you're buying the relics to protect them from further harm or desecration. So it's good for you to bid for a relic if you are going to donate it to a church, but it's bad if you're buying it for some, and I'm quoting here from a story in the Catholic News Agency, for some hipster bar that wants relics for decorations. People are trying to get eBay to clamp down on the sale of relics. And if you're wondering, where do these relics come from? I mean, obviously there's the bogus ones, but actually the more supposedly genuine ones, and some of these do have documents of accreditation from the Vatican attached to them. Some of them are where Churches, chapels, old convents and the like have closed down, and somewhere along the way all their contents have been dispersed and the relics have basically got out onto the open market. If you want relics of me, well, I've just been to the hairdresser, so I've got plenty of bits of hair. Going cheap.
If you want to grow your business, save time using the latest tech, and look great online, Weird Appeal Digital can help. We have a free, yes, that's free download listing 40 digital tools, apps and resources to help you grow your brand, promote your project, generate leads and reach your audience. Just go to www.appeal.digital/weirdtales for smart, effective digital design, and your free download. Go to www.appeal.digital/weirdtales.
Those of you fans of the English writer of ghost stories and supernatural horror tales, M.R. James, or Montague Road James, will be aware that a common theme in his tales, they're all short stories, is of some kind of ghost or malevolent spirit coming back to torment, haunt, betray a murderer, a person who's done them wrong. It's a good example in Martin's Close, where the ghost actually appears in the courtroom and terrifies the accused man of his crimes. Where did he get those ideas from? Well, obviously, great imagination, but in one of those instances of fact being stranger than fiction, here's a story about a French scholar. He originally began his career as a lawyer and then moved into the church and became a prior, and then later became a writer. His name is Gilles Ménage, and he lived during the 17th century. He died in the year 1692. And one of the tales he tells from his days in court was about an example of divine justice overtaking a criminal in a remarkable manner. There was a country priest who had a reputation for being notoriously violent and vicious, and he had a dispute about money matters with the local district's tax collector, who soon afterwards disappeared, there being a strong suspicion that he may have been murdered by the priest. By coincidence, about the same time, a man was executed for highway robbery, and as was the way in those days, his body was gibbeted in chains by the roadside as a warning to others. The relations of the highwayman came one by one night and took the body down with the intention of giving it a decent burial. As we've mentioned before on this, in bygone times, having a decent burial was seen as a very important thing if you were to be resurrected and ever get to heaven. Anyway, the relations had taken down the body, but a patrol went by, and worried by that and not wanting to be caught with the body, they sank the body into a nearby pond, not far from the priest's residence. Some fishermen, a few days later, when drawing in their nets, found the body, and the neighbours, applying their previous suspicions to the by then much disfigured body of the highwayman, said, "That's the body of the tax collector who disappeared." The priest was duly arrested, tried and condemned to death. He, however, continued to protest his injustice to the sentence, but when the day of execution arrived, he admitted that he had actually committed the crime of murdering the tax collector, but then said, "But I am unjustly condemned, for the tax collector's body and that of his dog, poor dog, are still in my garden where I buried them. I wasn't responsible for the body in the pond. A search was made of the man's garden, and it was true. The body of the tax collector and his poor dog were found there, and subsequent inquiries brought to light the secret of the body found in the pond. So there you go. You can't avoid justice, even when you bury your murder victims in your garden and somebody else's murder victim pops up in a pond. Thank you, Gilles Menage, for that little story. And that's it. We've almost run out of time. However, we'll squeeze in one final story, and that's relating this time to the perennial urban myth of the white van man. Now, the conspiracy theory here is that men in white vans lurk our streets and roads, planning all manner of ill-doing towards us. Now, it's not just in the UK, but it's pretty rife all across continental Europe. And depending upon the version you're going to hear, it's people who are going to kidnap children and then sell them off to childless couples, or sell them for paedophilia, or they're going to haul women off the streets to put them into prostitution and life in the sex industry, or they're just going to pull anybody off the streets for the illegal organ trade, to harvest their organs. That's kidneys and livers, as opposed to harmonica mouth organs and Hammond organs, I'd hasten to add. And those poor people then wake up in a dirty bath filled with ice, with strange scars and stitching around their stomach where their organs have been removed. Now, the truth is, there is very, very little evidence that any of this has ever happened anywhere. As for child abduction, well, yes, it does happen, but of the crimes reported in the UK, just under 1,200 in the year 2017 to 2018, 60% were by family members or people known to the children. Of the remaining attempts by strangers, most of those were attempted rather than complete abductions. So I say, it's not as rife as you might think. However, we had our own version of this here in the Waveney Valley, in the village where we record this show, when there were reports on our local internet chat service, Google Groups, an email communications link, that men in white vans had been spotted acting suspiciously in the village. They were described as swarthy, surly foreigners. They'd been seen driving and stopping outside of properties, looking the property up and down, checking their notes, then driving off and repeating the process at another building. What was it all about? Were they going to come back at night? Were they just casing the joint and going to come back at night to burgle the property? Well, no, as you probably guessed. It was just Amazon delivery men making their rounds, looking for properties to deliver their latest electronic gewgaws and books that we'd ordered. So, that's comforting to know. Next time you hear a bump in the night, it's not a white van man come to harvest your kidneys. It's just a ghoulie or a ghostie or something else rather fierce that lives in your cellar or your loft. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to the show. We hope you'll join us again next time. But until then, good night.
Black Shug, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com. and on Twitter @UrbanFantasist. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.